Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this regular called meeting of the Temple City Council. It is currently 5 p.m. Please rise as Pastor Robert Beeman leads us in the invocation, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by City Secretary Jana Llewellyn.
Yeah.
Pastor Beeman.
Shall we pray? Most gracious God, we thank you for just another time spent with you. We ask you, God, that you keep us, God, in all our ways. We thank you, God, that you have just delivered us from out of this thing and that thing, but we thank you that you have delivered us. We ask you, God, that you will, God, keep us in all our ways, not only, God, but visit us at all times. Keep your guardian angels around us. And as you do that, Lord, we thank you, God, that we do have your comfort. We ask you, God, that peace and tranquility, God, would be upon us at all times. Not only that, God, but you would keep everything in control. And God, we thank you that you are the one and true and only God, and you're the one that's going to keep us in all this mist. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both very much. At this time, we'll receive public comments. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may do so. As long as you signed up prior to this meeting, public comments will be received during this portion only. Please limit those comments to 3 minutes, and no discussion or final action will be taken by the city council. We do have one person who has signed up, Mr. Kenneth Harlan. Right here to the podium. Yeah, please. Yeah, no, you're fine. Please state your name and address for the record. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Kenneth Harlan and I live at 3550 Dairy Road, the very far east side of Temple. The part that gets forgotten, no water, sewage, internet, been that way for 13 years. But I digress. Today I'm talking about the hop. My housemate, who's handicapped from the chest down, was able to use the hop years ago with no problem. That's when our car broke down and he needed a way to get to the hospital. Well, now I used to be able to just lift him up. He was like 90 pounds wet when I first met him. So I was able to pick him up, throw him in a vehicle, no problem. Well, since his thyroid got zapped, he's gained a lot of weight. And we don't have a handicap vehicle and we can't afford one right now. So he thought he'd re-sign up for the hop. And he called Monday about the regular service and they said, no, we can't help you. So I looked up the information and I saw there was rural, because where we live is it's city limits, but it's pretty rural. So he called back up on Wednesday. Well, I did call the city on Monday and someone was supposed to get back to me, but no one did, see if the city could talk to the hop or something. But now, like I said, we don't have a handicap vehicle right now. And our taxes went up almost double, extra $3,000. So it's going to be hard to find a down payment for a vehicle. But now that he's tried to sign up for the hop again, the second time was on Wednesday. He asked for the rural hop and they said they couldn't help him. Even though years ago they were able to pick him up and get him to the hop. And he's got an important appointment next month where he has a pain pump right in his stomach area. And because once again, they said they can't help him, we have no idea on how to get him to his doctor's appointment. So we're hoping the city could maybe talk to the hop or something. So maybe they can continue service like they did years ago until we can, somehow find a handicap vehicle to be able to take him to his appointments. Right. And also called the city and on Monday too. And this is not as important, but I was just wondering when, after 13 years of living in the city, we bought the land and put a house out there, well, double wide. And we're just wondering when we're going to get city sewage. And maybe the city can finally push, I know it's not a city service, but maybe the city can talk to the people that provide internet for the city to go past the loop. Because once you go past 53, there's no services and we're paying city taxes and there's no services. So there's that. And oh, sorry, one more thing. I got a hold of Zoe before she got elected. And I was wondering why Anybody know who handles the loop? Is it the county or 53 TxDOT? Well, I was wondering, there's a new housing development that was going in and they put a turning lane in. I guess they have some sway or something, but there's no turning lane towards Hector P. Garcia. Now, I don't have any kids myself, but I think it's kind of weird that a new housing development can get a turning lane to go to the school, or they can get a turning lane to that new development that didn't even have a house up yet. But there's no turning lane that leads to the elementary school with the on ramp and the off ramp, you know, to go on to 53. So, but the main thing is about the hop. He had the service before.
Okay.
And now he can't.
All right.
We don't know how we're going to get him.
Yes, sir. There's a lot in that 3 minutes. And we're only able to speak to factual things. So the things about the internet and then the turning lane, et cetera, I can't address that. But you do need to know, or I want you to know that that the city has been in long-term discussions with the HOP. Actually, not just the city. It's like an 8-county area
Yes.
regarding the HOP. And I believe for that situation, there's a solution on the way, but it's probably a solution on the way in government time, which means maybe a year or so.
Okay.
So, but to be able to address someone that needs a special ride, like you're talking about
Yes,
for
sir.
your housemate, it appears right now, unless things drastically change, that there'll be a solution on the way.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, sir. All right. Next item is a public reading. A public hearing to consider adopting a resolution approving the Community Development Block Grant 2023-2024 Annual Action Plan and Budget, including funding recommendations. Ms. Chopin, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I presented the annual action plan in its entirety at the June 15th meeting. I do have the presentation available if you would like to see it again. If not, I ask that you open the podium for public comment.
Okay, very good. Council, anyone need to see the budget presentation again? All right, and at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item may do so. We ask you step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Anyone? All right. Anybody on the virtual platform? All right, and at this time, I'll close the public hearing. And council, if you have no further questions, then I'll entertain a motion on item 3.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve item 3 as Ms. Chopin presented, I believe, at the June meeting. I'll second it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Item 3 passes 4 votes to 0. Moving on is a public hearing to receive a presentation by the city manager and conduct a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 budget.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think my mic's not working.
How about that? Okay, very good. All right, so tonight it's my pleasure to provide an overview of the proposed 2024 budget, which, as council knows, we present in the context of a multi-year business plan that includes our strategic plan, a financial plan, the fiscal year 2024 annual budget, and our capital improvement plan. This is all in total a 6-year plan. And the reason that we present this way instead of it a year at a time is so that we're not looking at the picture one piece of a puzzle at a time, but rather we're able to see how all of the parts come together in order for us to accomplish and meet the vision that you all have set for our city, which is that Temple is a place that you'll love to call home, and that our organization meets our mission of providing exceptional service without exception. We have 5 focus areas that are laid out in our strategic plan, including high-performing organization, communication and collaboration, places and spaces, smart growth, and public safety. And within those 5 focus areas, we have a total of 10 strategic goals. Tonight, I want to provide some highlights of what's included in the business plan by way of initiatives and projects and programs that will allow us to make progress towards the accomplishment of these goals. So starting with our focus area, places and spaces, and our goal of having neighborhoods where people love to live. The 24 business plan recommends the expansion of our Love Where You Live neighborhood planning program. Council will recall that we started this program back in 2019 with 18 initial neighborhood planning districts. The goal of this program is to work with individual neighborhoods to develop plans that bring together folks that live in the neighborhoods, work, worship, and otherwise have our stakeholders or have an interest in the neighborhood to identify improvements that are needed or desired to increase the vibrancy and the livability within our neighborhoods. At this time, we've had a very successful program and many of our plans are completed or underway, and we are recommending that we expand our program out to additional neighborhood planning districts. As I mentioned, this program started with 18 districts, primarily in North and East Temple. And so now we're recommending adding some of the older areas in South and West Temple, bringing up our total number of neighborhood planning districts to 26. 24, and then also adding 9 additional strategic corridors that would allow us to look at some of our heavily traveled roads and streets and really begin to plan and help make sure that we're continuing to invest in those important areas. If you know me, you know I love a good plan, but I love a good plan that is able to be implemented. So it's important. It's a value that this community has long held, and this council has continued, that when we make a plan, we have the resources allocated to implement that. And the Places and Spaces Capital Improvement Program does that for our neighborhood planning districts and our Parks Master Plan. This is a total program that you began this past year with an initial investment of $18 million, and we're proposing to continue over the next 6-year plan at a total of an additional $62 million. This will help us begin implementing projects that are coming from our neighborhood plans, as well as our Parks Master Plan. For fiscal year 24, projects that are recommended to be funded include improvements to West Temple Park, Von Rosenberg Park, Walker Park, Colquitt Park, Miller Springs Nature Center, and the Gober Recreation Center, as well as implementing the improvements recommended in the neighborhood plans for Nettles Park in the Garden District, Storybook Grove Park in downtown, for the 14th Street improvements recommended in the Ferguson Park neighborhood plan, the Avenue D improvements also recommended in Ferguson Park, and district identification projects in Temple Heights, Las Cruces, Bird Creek, and Barnhart. We're also recommending the expansion and creation of additional grant programs to help foster neighborhood improvements. And this includes 2 grant programs that are available to nonprofit partners within the community, including education and recreation partnership grants, as well as community enhancement partnership grants to provide programming that helps us further our strategic initiatives. So it might be things like after school or arts programming, or things like housing improvement programs with nonprofit partners that work within our communities. And then our neighborhood improvement grants would allow us to provide matching grants to property owners and business owners within our neighborhood planning districts to do repairs and improvements to the exterior and the facade of buildings and homes within the neighborhood planning areas. We're also recommending in the 6-year plan additional resources in our housing and community development team, including a grant coordinator and a housing resource coordinator. We're also recommending, as you heard earlier today, the continued investment in the Temple Revitalization Corporation as it relates to the goal of beautiful spaces and unique experiences. we are recommending the establishment of a Parks and Recreation Maintenance Program that would allow us to build up to a $1.5 million annual allocation to do replacements and maintenance in our park system. So things like replacing existing playground structures, recreation amenities, so that we can do the necessary maintenance and upkeep of our park system outside of a bond program. We're also recommending the addition of several staff positions in our Parks and Recreation team, including a landscape spray technician, several additional maintenance workers, and a recreation specialist focused on after-school programming, and an assistant golf professional. We're also recommending the establishment of a park ranger program that would allow us to provide additional law enforcement and security within our park system. And we're recommending the establishment of master plans for a couple of our facilities, including the Hillcrest Cemetery, as well as the Salmons Golf Course. We're also recommending a restructure in our recreation division that would add 3 additional positions, making sure that each team has a dedicated manager position and we have the resources necessary to implement the programs that we'll talk about here in just a second. We are recommending the development of an arts and culture master plan that would bring our nonprofit partners together throughout the community, organizations like the Cultural Activities Center, the Temple Civic Theater, the Temple Symphony Orchestra, Temple College, and others who are providing services and furthering arts and culture within our community, really being able to identify where we as a community want to see us invest and grow in this area. We're also recommending the implementation of our special event strategic plan that was recently adopted by the City Council. This would allow us to add additional resources to host new and enhanced special events throughout the year. We're also recommending the continuation and expansion of our Heritage Arts and Tourism Partnership grants. These are grants that help support our nonprofit partners in the areas of arts, tourism, and heritage. We're recommending the funding for the schematic design work necessary for improvements to the central branch of our library as identified in the recently adopted library master plan, as well as the acquisition of sites for 3 branch libraries within neighborhoods within our community. The business plan also recommends that we begin construction and staffing for one of those 3 branch libraries within the 6-year planning period. We're also recommending 2 additional assistant director positions, a youth services librarian, and a facility manager, all reflected in the library master plan. In the focus area of communication and collaboration, our goal is to have open and responsive communication with our community. We've made great strides over the last few years in making sure that we have multiple ways of reaching out into our community, telling the Temple story, engaging with our residents, and telling the world about the city of Temple. And we do have a few additional resources in future years of the plan that we're recommending in our communications team to continue this progress, including a marketing specialist, a community engagement specialist, a webmaster, and an assistant director position. In the focus area, smart growth, our goal is that we are a city that supports well-managed growth and development to promote a thriving economy. In this area, we're recommending some additional positions in our development services team, including an additional building inspector, a planning manager, and a business navigator position that would be focused on helping small and startup businesses navigate through our development process and open for business in Temple. The plan also recommends the continued support of the Temple Economic Development Corporation. Our goal of having infrastructure and systems that support exceptional services and community growth. As of now, we have just over $500 million in active capital improvement programs throughout our community. These are in all areas, including utilities, mobilities, facilities, drainage, parks, land, and equipment. In the 6-year plan, there's an additional $534 million in projects recommended. Again, in all areas, including utilities, mobility, parks and places and spaces, public safety, facilities, and equipment. So with that very robust capital improvement program, we're also recommending the addition of project management resources to help us manage that capital improvement program, including engineers and project managers in our facility services team. For the capital improvement program related to our mobility program, there's $130 million of projects recommended in the next 6 years. For 2024, our focus is recommended to be on improvements to 42nd Street, to Little River Road, to Hartrick Bluff Road, to the construction of Phase 2 of Poison Oak, the Phase 2 of the Georgetown Railroad, and then beginning design for improvements to Young Avenue and Lower Troy, Henderson Street, and MLK Drive Phase 1. We're also recommending the 3rd year of funding of our pavement preservation program. Much like the parks maintenance program we talked about just a few minutes ago, our ultimate needs for annual pavement maintenance are $1.75 million. So we're building up to this amount with a $250,000 allocation per year. So in 24, we'll have reached the $750,000 threshold, and we'll continue to climb until we get to our recommended level. We're also recommending the addition of several mobility related maintenance crews, including a right-of-way crew that would be focused on pavement marking maintenance, a street patching crew, a forestry or tree trimming crew, a right-of-way crew that would be focused on our alley maintenance, a sign crew, and an additional street reconstruction crew. We are also, per the public comments earlier today, we're also recommending funding for enhanced transit services so that we are able to provide more robust public transit services through our partnership with Hill Country Transit District. We're looking at moving to micro mobility transit zones with a connector route between Coppers Cove and Temple. And at your second meeting in August, Raymond Suarez with the Hill Country Transit District will be here to provide a very detailed presentation to you on what that will look like. For our smart growth utility capital improvement program, we have $234 million in projects planned over the next 6 years. The big project for next year is the Temple Belton wastewater plant expansion. We also have several maintenance crews proposed in our utility services team, including 4 additional water maintenance crews, 3 sewer crews, 4 water operators, 2 utility foremen, and 2 environmental program techs over the 6-year plan. For solid waste, several additional crews are recommended, routes are recommended, including 4 additional garbage routes in FY 25, 6, 8, and 9, 4 additional recycling routes matched in those same years, 3 additional roll-off routes, an additional brush and bulk route, and 2 additional commercial front load routes over the 6-year plan. We're also recommending the addition of a litter crew to our solid waste team to help reduce litter in our streets and alleys, as well as 3 swing driver positions, a recycling assistant that would allow us to expand our recycling efforts into multifamily properties, 2 maintenance worker positions, an additional customer service representative, and a code compliance officer that would be embedded with our solid waste team. In our focus area of public safety, we have a goal of having a safe and healthy community. Several priorities include expanding our patrol resources in our police department, allowing us to go from 8 patrol districts to 10 and adding additional patrol officers. We're also recommending the addition of training officers to help provide support to our expanded training center and training program for our officers. Additional resources for criminal investigations, including an additional property crimes detective unit, a supervisory position for our crime scene technicians, and a detective position focused on electronic forensic work. We're also recommending the final staffing phase for our violent crime enforcement squad and the expansion of our neighborhood and district community policing program. Altogether, we're recommending 32 additional sworn police officer positions and 5 civilian positions over the 6-year plan. We're also recommending additional animal services field officers and shelter technicians to help make sure that we have the resources necessary to provide services as our community continues to grow and as we anticipate the opening of the expanded animal shelter in the upcoming months. As it relates to fire, priorities include the addition of 2 new squad units that would be fully staffed. You can see there on the right side of the screen that apparatus is an example of one of our squad units. These are smaller, more specialized vehicles that are able to respond to things like emergency medical calls more efficiently and provide additional companies responding out of our stations so that we have more response capacity as our community is growing. We're also recommending similar in the police department for some dedicated training officers to our fire department as we open our expanded public safety training center, additional resources in our deputy fire marshal, in our fire marshal's office with the addition of 3 new deputy fire marshals to help with development services, fire investigation, and fire education and prevention. We're also recommending that the city be split into 2 response districts so that we have 2 battalion chiefs on duty at any given time to make sure that we have an appropriate span of control for the stations and companies that are supervised by that battalion chief, and that when we have multiple events happening, major events happening, at the same time that we have the management resources to effectively and safely manage those major fire events. We're also recommending adding additional minimum staffing coverage so that we, as we're adding firefighter positions, we're keeping up with the floater positions that are needed to cover leave, vacation, training, and other similar situations. We're also recommending the addition of ladder truck staffing so that we have 4 personnel assigned to each ladder truck. Ladder trucks, as they arrive on scene, require both what you would do with an engine, but also require the ladder itself to be set up. So having more hands on the crew to help get that done quickly and safely will help reduce our response times and able to get people to safety more quickly. We're also recommending the construction, staffing, and equipping of Fire Station number 9 as recommended in the newly adopted Fire Master Plan, which is proposed to be located in West Temple. Altogether, we are recommending an additional 53 sworn firefighter positions and 7 civilian positions over the 6-year plan. We're also recommending the continuation of our public safety capital improvement program with $65 million in additional projects over the next 6 years. For 2024, our focus will be on the construction of our public safety training campus classroom, our indoor shooting range and evidence storage facility, the replacement of our aircraft rescue and firefighting truck at the airport, a replacement of one of our fire engines, and those squad purchases that we talked about just a few minutes ago. We're also recommending the addition of code compliance resources to our Transform Temple team to continue to provide services as our community experiences growth. We're recommending the first phase of the Arbor of Hope, which you'll hear more about in your meeting in the next 2 weeks. Just a quick snapshot of the site plan. We'll talk about that in more detail. And then as our last focus area is high performing organization, a goal of having an organization that's committed to performance excellence. We're recommending the continued investment in technology, including major systems like our police record management system program, but also personnel to help us make sure that we're maintaining our systems, providing the necessary training to be efficient with our technology, and maintaining cybersecurity. We're also recommending the investment in our capital equipment so that we continue to have vehicles that are able to effectively provide the services that our citizens rely on our team to provide. We're also recommending investments in our facilities, including a facility maintenance program, which is, again, very similar to the parks maintenance program and the pavement preservation program that we presented, that allows us to build up to an optimal $1.5 million in annual investment in the maintenance of our facilities so that we can do that outside of bond programming. We're also a goal of an efficient, transparent, and accountable government. As you know, we are very fiscally stable and very fiscally strong. We have a AA rating from the Standard & Poor's and has recently been reaffirmed as a long-term rating with a stable outlook. And that's due really to things like our very strong management, our formal long-term financial and capital planning, our strong institutional framework, and our very strong reserves and liquidity. And much of that credit goes to Tracy and her team. And we are proposing throughout the 6-year plan a few additions within the finance department just to keep those resources that she needs as our city grows, our organization grows, so that we continue to maintain our focus on fiscal soundness. And then last, but certainly not least, our goal of having talented and dedicated employees who have a heart for service. You've heard me say a million times that the City of Temple is a service-based organization. Providing services to our citizens is what we do. We don't make things, we don't produce things. We are here to serve our community. And if we are to achieve our vision, of our mission of providing exceptional service without exception, we need to do what we can to recruit, retain, and develop exceptional employees, because it's through our employees that we are delivering these services. You heard a detailed presentation from Tara at your workshop about the civil service market study. So I'll just mention here briefly that our focus this year is on compensation adjustments for firefighter and police officer positions. Our recommendations are intended to ensure that we remain competitive in our market and continue to attract the very best and brightest to work for our organization and to provide services to our community. All total, the FY 2024 budget is proposed at just under $262 million, which is 2.37% increase from prior year. For general fund, the primary sources of revenue continue to be sales tax at 33%, ad valorem or property tax at just under 21%, and solid waste fees at 13.5%. Our main category of expenditures in general fund remains personnel. Just as we've just mentioned, we're a service-based organization and we provide services through our employees. So personnel is going to be our main expenditure category. The budget, and Tracy will talk to you a little bit more in detail about this, but the budget is based on a property tax rate that remains unchanged from the current rate of 61.3 cents per $100 valuation. You can see there how Temple compares in solid waste rates. In water and wastewater, the vast majority of revenue comes from fees for service. For water and wastewater, our expenditures are in operations, debt service, and personnel. You can see there how Temple compares to our peer cities in water and wastewater. And again, Temple derives almost 100% of our water and wastewater revenues from charges for service. We do not have impact fees. Most of our peer cities do have impact fees that are charged for each new residential lot and each new commercial development. So we remain competitive with our charges for service, even in the absence of impact fees. Today, you can see here a snapshot of our FY 24 budget calendar. Today, we are having our first our public hearing on the city's budget. You are also be discussing and voting on a proposed tax rate today. Tracy is going to go over that with you in a little bit more detail. But I'll just point out that next date of July 25th, when we're scheduled to receive our certified tax roll, is an important date. Right now, we just have an estimated tax rate. So what we're asking you to consider today is the rate that remains unchanged. Once we get the certified roll, we may be able to propose a different rate to you, but what you set today, you can go down from, but you cannot go up from. So that is our recommendation while we wait for the certified roll and the calculations. We'll talk about the tax rate again at your first meeting in August. And at that time, we'll be prepared to share any updates that we think you can make to the tax rate. With that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Council, any questions? Comments? A growing city requires a lot. So congratulations to the work that y'all done on the budget. We appreciate that very much. And as a citizen myself, it's important to let you guys know how hard the staff works on this and how much the council supports these kinds of things. And I've said it before a couple of times, you miss a year of progress, you set yourself back 4 or 5 years. And one thing that we've done well, I think, through the last few years is to maintain the progress that is needed to keep our city on a firm foundation. So to the taxpayers that participate in that, it's very much appreciated by the staff and by this council. So this item is subject to a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item may do so. We ask you step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Mr. Lytle? I know you.
But you want it for the record.
We do. Please.
Alan Lytle, 504 Paseo del Plata here in Temple. I attended this afternoon's workshop and was extremely impressed with what y'all are doing for our fire and police. I greatly appreciate all the hard work that you're doing to keep them happy and keep them in line with all the other departments for getting what they're getting paid. I was sorry to hear that I didn't get to find out about my other friends at the solid waste in the water department. So I hope that this, I tried to read through the budget, but I hope that this budget also includes a very substantial raise in taking care of those two departments as well. Little confused on the 2 bottom line numbers that I did get to understand, which was how much we were bringing in this coming 24 and how much we're spending. It appears that we're about $10 million short. So I don't quite understand. And it looks like we're getting that from leftovers from this year. I don't quite understand how that's working.
Monica, could you go back to that slide, please? It's toward the very end. Up.
Yeah.
A few more.
And that's the tax rate. I'm talking about the budget itself here. I'm sorry.
Do you have the clicker?
I think it's in I have it. Yeah. probably.
Mr. Lytle, while they're pulling that up, I'll address your first question regarding salary increases. Yeah. So what the city's policy around salary increases have always been that the public safety employees receive salary increases 1 year, and then everyone else, the general government employees, receive increases the next year.
Okay.
So this is public safety's turn this time around.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
You find yours? Trying to find where I read that.
Yes, that's a slide. Do you want to?
I don't know if you actually showed it or not.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, that one shows it.
Uh,
251 and 2 versus 261.
Correct. And as you'll note, in the budget document, we do list details of at the bottom there of what that difference is. But as a policy in our our financial policies of estimating revenues and how we estimate expenditures, each year we typically have a favorable balance.
Right.
And the way to get that back into the budget cycle is council has adopted policies of what that can fund. And one of them is capital equipment.
Okay.
So that's, the funding from that is coming from fund balance. So it's
Okay.
not in the revenue section, it's in the
Right.
expenditure. And I believe there's some carryover funds.
This
that-
year.
Yeah, that also applies to the hotel motel tax fund. And with the reinvestment zone fund, that is a special revenue fund that is set up by a financing plan.
Right.
And it already has like carryover and appropriation of some capital projects from previous years.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
I hope
We're not,
that-
we're not the federal government going into debt every
No,
year
I
just to
know.
maintain the budget. Yeah. And you know what? So Ms. Myers mentioned a minute ago about our fiscal strength, our long-term track record. This is either my 10th or 11th budget. And Ms. Bernard said we typically have money left over at the end of the year. And in my experience, typically means 10 out of 10 years or 11 out of 11 years. I mean, it's not that every, 3 or 4 years is a little bit of money left. Every year that we've done this because we crazy underestimate revenues, overestimate expenses. And as long as everything runs pretty smoothly, even like a weird COVID year, right? Even during that year, there was, I hate to call it a surplus because it sounds like then it's put into some account, but it's those extra monies, that surplus money is targeted so that we don't have to go out and bond something later, like a fire truck or trash trucks or whatever. We end up paying interest on that money. Money that's left over, being fiscally responsible, pay cash for those big capital outlays so that ultimately we don't end up financing something and paying interest on it.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Once again, like he said, you guys have done such a fantastic job. I really do appreciate it. I know you are underappreciated, and I want to be sure that you know some of it's appreciated.
Yeah, they're not underappreciated by this council. You bet. You're welcome. And thank you for the good question.
Mayor, I want to add to what his question and what you just said. Part of why we were able to do this and have this rollover, of course, is with the finance department's wonderful management, but it's also a 6-year budget plan that we look at on a continual basis, adjust for any changes, but that 6-year plan is something that I, as a council member, am so proud to be a part of, and I had no role whatsoever in developing it, but I'm grateful for you all and your staffs for doing it.
Very, very helpful
Yeah.
in making that happen.
That policy smooths out the bumps for sure.
I would also note too, it just a strong Temple economy, the diversity in Temple as we continue to grow.
We're in a good place and in a good time in Temple right now for sure. All right, moving on to the next item is to have a discussion regarding the proposed tax rate. So item A is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the council. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Sorry about that. Anybody on the virtual platform? Okay. With that, now I'll close the public hearing. Item 5 is to discuss a proposed tax rate and A, to consider adopting a resolution authorizing council to place a proposal to adopt the tax rate of $0.613 on August 17th, 2023. Item B is to consider adopting a resolution scheduling the public hearing on the proposed tax rate for 5 p.m. on August 17th, 2023. And item C is to consider adopting a resolution scheduling the adoption of the proposed tax rate for 5 p.m. on August 17th, 2023. Sorry about that. Okay. Yes.
I have a mic. Just as Brand went over and today, we had the public, or just had the public hearing on the city's budget, and you just read through the proposed tax rate, council vote, and proposed on the proposed tax rate. On August 17th is when the public hearing and adoption of the budget, the public hearing, and final reading, approving the tax roll and levying taxes and setting the tax rate will occur at 5 o'clock. All of this process and timelines for required meeting dates, publication and notices, and the motion language is governed by state law through the truth and truth taxation, and also by the city charter. As Ms. Myers went over, the proposed tax rate is 61.30 cents per $100 valuation. That's the same total rate as it was the previous year, but it is a shift in 1.25 cents moving to the debt service for capital and capital improvements, and a decrease in the maintenance and operation rate, which funds the personnel costs, et cetera, in the general fund. Just historically looking at the tax rate over the past 10 years, it's been the goal to stabilize and minimize any tax increases as they relate to capital improvements. And as you can see, the total rate of 61.30 is lower than it's been for the past since 2015. And then 2023 was also 61.30. Also, as Ms. Myers reported, we have not received the certified tax roll nor our tax rate calculations. But this meeting, as you set the tax rate, you can come down at the future meetings without resetting the timeline, but you can't go above that. And I think also this year, we usually have the calculations by this date. And even the certified roll, they will release it prior to July 25th. But as you heard a lot on Senate Bill 2, that's also impacting some of the release of that information, because some of it has to be built into the calculations, et cetera. And with it just being passed, not sure the software, et cetera, how to adjust it to calculate those rates. So we should have it soon. Of course, we'll have it hopefully by August 3rd meeting, we have that information too.
Very good. Council, anything else? All right, then at this time, council, I'll entertain a motion on item. We can take A, B, and C all together.
Yes, you can, unless there's a preference to
Okay, very good. The council, at this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval on items 5A, 5B, and 5C. Together in one motion.
I'll move to approve items 5A, B, and C.
We have a motion by Councilmember Pilkington. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Item 5A, B, and C pass 4 votes to 0. Moving on to the consent agenda, all items listed under this consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and may be enacted in one motion. If discussion is desired by any member of the council, an item can be removed at the request of that council member and be considered separately. There was nothing that was asked to be removed for separate consideration during the workshop. Has that changed, council? Everybody still good? All right, then at this time, council, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda, which is items 6A through 6Q.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 6A through 6Q.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. Council, please cast your vote. The consent agenda passes 4 votes to 0. Moving on to the regular agenda, item 7 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance on a rezoning request from agriculture to planned development general retail with a site development plan to allow a mini storage warehouse on 6.8 plus or minus acres situated in the B. Strassner Survey, abstract number 823 and addressed as 814 East Young Avenue. Mr. Chandler.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. And so this proposed plan development with general retail is shown here. This is at the northeast corner of Lower Troy and East Young, so in East Temple. And so just to orient you to the property, facing north, this top left-hand corner, facing north along Lower Troy Road, you can see kind of the rural nature of that part of town. This is within the city limits, of course, as a zoning case. As you go clockwise, you can see the site with our lovely new communications and marketing approved signs, blue and red, as opposed to the old yellow ones. So they've certainly, that's an upgrade. And then clockwise, you can see a house, manufactured home park on East Young. And then the last one, the lower left-hand corner, is an existing home on the site proposed for development. And of course, as a plan development, it includes a site plan, which I'm showing here. And this is for the self-storage, bringing that use down to general retail so that all the other uses in general retail would be allowed if approved. This is with 5.8 acres. Which excludes an acre in the bottom right-hand corner with the existing home. The developer hasn't decided what would be done with that home. Perhaps the manager of this self-storage could live there. And a home is still allowed in general retail, so it doesn't make that non-conforming. But within the 5.8 acres to be developed, this site plan shows 12 different buildings for a total of 118,500 gross square feet. Keep in mind that self-storage is one of the lowest traffic generating uses. So lots of building, not a lot of traffic. The site plan includes 17% landscaping, which does include a detention pond up in the top right-hand corner. The office, the parking, circulation, sidewalks are also shown on the site plan, as well as trees along the sidewalks and within the other green areas, future landscaped areas. And so when we look at our future land use plan within the comprehensive plan, this is a use that is compliant within residential and neighborhood services. And looking at existing water and sewer, sewer is available along Lower Troy Road. Water is available along East Young. Keep in mind the existing home is on septic, and so any extension of sewer would have to bore under the railroad. And so looking at the thoroughfare and trails master plan, both East Young and Lower Troy Road are on the thoroughfare plan as community collectors. Sidewalks are required. As we mentioned, the site plan includes those sidewalks. So sidewalks on both of those future community collectors. No trail requirements per the trails master plan. And then in terms of public notice, 13 notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet and none have been returned. Staff recommends approval of the request with the site development plan and subject to the following conditions. These are key conditions. We didn't want to include some of the redundant, more common ones that are in your packet, but just to focus on, allowing the self-storage facility, of course, in the general retail, applying the general retail-based zoning standards, that the building shall not exceed 1 story, that a decorative wrought iron fence on both streets would be provided, shown on the site plan. And then East Young, that would also include some regularly spaced masonry columns, that a 10-foot wide landscape strip with trees and shrubs are provided adjacent to the 6-foot sidewalks on Lower Troy and East Young, and that any minor changes could be approved administratively, and major ones, of course, would have to come back to you all. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission at their July 3rd meeting voted 5-0 to recommend approval per staff recommendation. And that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council? Anything?
Mayor, I do have a question. Brian, you mentioned in your presentation, the wastewater and the water lines,
Yes.
but there's no need for those with the home being on septic and this being a self-storage facility. Correct?
Right. In terms of wastewater, they're not, as far as I know, not planning to tap into or extend sewer,
Okay.
and water is certainly available, and they would. get a
But then
water
you
tap for
said,
that.
keep in mind, it would require boring.
For if they were to ever connect to the wastewater line
Okay.
along Lower Troy. So if you look at the aerial, you can see that the green wastewater line
Right.
is on the west side. And so that is on the west side of the railroad. So
Right.
any extension would have to bore under the
Okay.
railroad. And
So your remark was really just
If they-
theoretical and
if they were to
that
ever,
making
yes, ma'am.
this a good use because the need for water and wastewater is minimal.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I get
So,
it. Thank
yes.
you. It was a
Thank you for saying it much
curiosity and
better than I
wondered-
did.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Anything else? Item 7 is subject to a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item may do so. Step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the platform. Actually, we don't need the address, correct? Just state your name for the record, please, ma'am.
My name's Joanne Dudley. I live on the east side and I travel to Scott and White on Airport Road on a regular basis. I don't have a problem with the storage facility. I have a problem with 363, Loop 363. That road is awful narrow. And there are many times that going that route, there's a lot of traffic. And I've had to have pulled over because the police have had to escort big trucks on that road. And they've had to pull over the oncoming lane. And we've had to ditch our cars in the road into the grass. And now you're adding more. I know you're saying not much traffic, but these people that are going to be putting stuff in storage are going to be putting them in with trucks. And we're already having a lot of trucks on that road. And you're just asking for an accident. When are you going to enlarge that road? You just keep adding things to the loop, and you're not paying attention to this. The loop is only 2 lanes.
Right. Yeah, in fact, that's a state road. So that's not something that the city of Temple is responsible for or can expand on their own.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying. That's my old neighborhood. I lived over there on East Young for 20 years. And it's really grown up, and there has been some increase in traffic. Of course, I don't know, but as Mr. Chandler said, the storage facilities generate the fewest trips per day
Right.
of almost any other facility. And I'll bet half of those will come up through the neighborhood instead of on 363. So I understand, but in
I'm
the whole,
thinking half of them are going to come up through that trailer park. That's enlarging and growing
Blue
and
Bonnet.
growing,
right?
and they're going to be going to that. So you're going to have them going over there.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor and council, if we may defer to Jason Deckman, our senior transportation planner, who has his hand up very patiently to address some of those questions.
Okay, before we do that, is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak? Okay. Mr. Deckman?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting me weigh in here. As Mr. Chandler pointed out, Loop 363 is a state maintained highway. We have had conversations with them about the traffic in that area. There's several intersections, so it's something that we're looking at if we have influence on where we may not have direct control over. We're in the conversation. And I'm trying to rapidly scroll through the proposed 24 budget. There is a line in there that came out of our mobility master plan to look at the intersection of East Young and Shell and whether that needs to be straightened and possibly widened. So to address the residents' comments, I don't disagree, and we do have some projects on the books to handle the traffic that she's talking about.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else on the platform? Anybody else from the audience before I close the public hearing? You're close to there, aren't you?
Yep.
Fairly.
I go by there all the time. Like I was mentioning earlier, Kenneth Harlan,
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if the guy on the phone or anything knows about maybe what I mentioned earlier, since there is those big trucks and everything going on, and there's no turning lane towards the elementary school. So is there any talks about maybe making it safer for people dropping their kids off or bringing them back? Because there's been a lot of big trucks that go through there and there's no turning lane.
Are we still talking about at the
The
elementary school
how she was mentioning the loop, the Hector P. Garcia right over here.
right? Yeah, I understand. Kathy, is that something that we can,
No.
I'm sorry, we moved on from that topic from public comments. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And there may be something in the budget for that intersection.
I almost
specifically.
got hit because I am where my road goes, it goes from Lavandusky and then goes to Dairy.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm on the far, I'm like actually at first property
Understand.
in city limits.
Yeah.
So. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Because I almost got hit before turning left onto Lavandusky, not
understand.
towards the school. So I was just wondering, because not everybody pays attention. They're on their cell phones.
And they're driving too fast. I've got 2 tickets out there.
And
over
the
the
school
years.
right there.
I
I'm just
understand.
worried about, that's one thing. I don't have kids myself that I know of. I was in the UK for
Come
2
on.
years. But
Okay, now we're
I
really
did
off
ancestry
topic.
DNA, so they need to find
We
me.
need to wrap this one up.
But I'm just wondering, it's a dangerous road and no
Yes,
turning
sir.
lane.
Understood.
towards the
And
school.
Mr. Chandler can help you with that as far as getting to the right person. Okay, very good. If there are no further comments, then I will close the public hearing. Is that good? All right, council, if there's nothing else for Mr. Chandler, I'll entertain a motion on item number 7.
I move to approve item 7 as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion by Councilmember Pilkington. We have a second by Councilmember Long. Council, please cast your vote. Item 7 passes 4 votes to 0. Again, ma'am, thank you for your comments. Item 8 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing an update to the maximum allowable billable ambulance rates to be charged for ambulance services provided within the city of Temple, effective October 1st, 2023. Chief Randalls.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a requested update by our current emergency provider for emergency and medical transport, Temple EMS or AMR. And we do have a representative here tonight that I think is going to address this item in more detail about why they're requesting the rate increase. But the last one was done when Temple EMS or AMR was first contracted by the city as the emergency provider back in 2017. So there's been no increases or updates since then. I did do a review of several different cities around, and this is in line with those cities. Actually, we're kind of at the lower end I saw prices anywhere from around $800 to a little bit over $2,000 for an ambulance trip. Ambulance pricing is very tough to compare apples to apples just because of the ways people bill for them. Some will bill a lower base rate, but then charge for each individual supply and item and procedure that they perform plus mileage. We've chose to go a different route. And so our base fee or our ambulance fee includes all of those disposable supplies and procedures. So if you get an ambulance trip, then basically everything that happens to you in the back of the ambulance is included in that fee. And then there's also mileage on that. Also, mileage is really weird on how that some people bill. Again, most people bill for a loaded mile where they actually have the patient on board. Some actually bill from the time they leave their fire station, pick up the patient, and then back to the hospital, and then all the way back to the station. So again, ours is a loaded mile. And so I think that these are all reasonable requests by by our emergency provider. And like I said, I'm here to answer any questions if needed.
This is emergency only.
Actually, this will actually cover both emergency
Okay.
and non-emergency. So it's all EMS rates in the city.
Okay. 6 years, right? October,
It was, I believe
2016 or 17.
yeah, we believe we did it in September of 17
Okay.
was the last update.
And how many ambulance services total, emergency and non-emergency?
So emergency 1 and non-emergency currently 4.
4? And so does this change, this applies to all of them?
That will apply to all of them.
Okay, so
Yep.
we're not just
That's
onesies,
correct.
twosies.
Yeah, if you are an ambulance franchisee or provider in the city of Temple, this applies to you.
Got it. Thank you. Council, any questions for Chief? Right, this item is also subject to a public hearing. As you step to the podium and state just your name, Alan.
Alan Lytle. I know this is probably necessary for them to keep running their business. But my question is, how much of this increase are the insurance is going to pay for so that older senior citizens who don't have this kind of money can still afford to have an ambulance take them to the hospital?
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. First, I'd like to address a little bit of what his question was or his statement. So my name is Byron Sedlacek. I'm the operations manager for American Medical Response. I've been with them for going on about 19 years now, and I've been here since we started the contract with the city of Temple in 2017. As the chief alluded to, we've been operating under the same rates for fee for service that we have since we started this contract. And the rate increase that we're asking for is just a 15%. And I did kind of do some research as far as the increase in cost. I mean, I think everybody pretty much understands that.
Can you, sorry to interrupt, can you give us that increase in dollars roughly? Are you able to do that? 15% more of what?
Yeah. Do we?
So current rate is 11.25 or 11.25 and we're going to 12.50.
Yeah.
Almost.
1,125?
Yeah.
Yep. Got it.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't have the specific numbers
all
right
right.
here in front of me. So
I'll put you on the spot.
okay, that's okay. I'm used to it. So doing some research back over, everybody understands going through COVID in the last 6 years, there's been a pretty much, drastic increase in inflation, cost of expenses, et cetera. And just for some examples that I pulled out, medical supplies on average, we're seeing about a 17% increase from what we were paying for in 2017. Fuel costs, everybody knows that one. That's been about a 45% increase. And then we did some salary increases, much as similar to what the city has done. And that's been about a 24% increase since we started operation here in 2017. So we feel that, 15% is just pretty nominal to keep us able to provide the city a great service without any subsidy requirements. So the one thing I did want to go to answer that gentleman's question was, without getting off on a huge tangent here, medical billing is a really complicated process. And to speak to that,
So Medicare and Medicaid are set reimbursement rates. We could charge $1 million per trip, and Medicare and Medicaid is only going to pay whatever they deem appropriate. The remainder of that balance, we can't go after. That's illegal to do so. So for the senior citizens or the ones who are on Medicare and Medicaid, this rate increase really won't affect them too much because their rates are pretty much controlled by Medicare and Medicaid. Where this will affect is in the private insurances and the private pays too. So that's where we'll see an increase in our revenue by increasing these rates through those avenues. So
Out of curiosity, would your services be considered in network or out of network? Are they going to all be out of network?
it depends on the insurance company that the person has. But pretty much to my understanding, and I'm not a, insurance billing expert, but most of the emergency type things. So if you're having a chest pain or heart attack or in a car wreck, those are pretty much all considered in network.
Yeah, emergency would be.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a Medicare billing expert or insurance expert, but from what I've seen, they're all considered in network.
Okay. Yeah. Out of curiosity,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm curious.
Yeah.
We're talking about increasing to $12.50.
Mhm.
Do you know off the top of your head what the Medicare reimbursement rate is?
If I gave you any number right now, it would be a scientific guess.
But it's nowhere near 12.50.
Oh, God, no. It's
Yeah.
so Medicare, again, trying not to get off on a tangent here. Medicare sets their reimbursement rates by the location and population. So I was with AMR out in Milam County. That's considered super rural, so they get a higher reimbursement rate. The city of Temple in this area here has a reimbursement rate, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it is. I think it's around $380, $400, something like that on average. You go to a city like Austin, they're considered a more urban or larger thing, so their reimbursement rate's a little bit lower. But there's many different classifications for Medicare.
More trips, fewer miles, probably.
More trips, fewer miles, and there's more trips happening per day, et cetera.
Right.
How the federal government does it. But I
Okay.
think, if memory serves, I think the number is somewhere between like $380 to $400 per trip.
Okay. Okay.
And then Medicaid's even lower than that. So,
Right. Very good. Counseling, more quick.
Eat the remainder, obviously.
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, that's the bottom line,
yeah, that's,
as do the hospitals.
yeah,
as-
exactly. We
Well,
call it
they don't lose $900 on the trip. Right.
No,
They're not
they don't
losing
lose
money every trip.
900
Yeah,
on the
no.
trip, But they eat they eat what they're not basically reimbursed.
yeah,
Well, their profit is 380 minus whatever it took them to run it.
Right.
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 Yeah. So like I said, you can bill whatever you want to, but your collection rate is going to be dependent on your government payers, private
Sure.
payers,
Got
and
it.
your commercial insurances and stuff. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chief, this is all in line with what other communities are charging? Okay. All right, very good. Counseling, more questions for Chief or the representative? I don't remember your name, but
Byron
what's your last name?
Sedlacek.
Okay, that's the one I thought.
Yeah. It's pretty common. So.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ambulance. that's
Yeah,
what we call
I'll
it.
go by that.
Okay, okay, very good. Counsel, any questions? Anything else? All right,
For clarity, the proposed new rate is $1,295 for
from 11,
$1,125 for advanced life support.
Sorry, that's what I get for trying to do that from memory.
that's all right. Okay, if there's nothing else, then anybody else, anybody on the platform? Step to the podium, sir.
Hello, Kenneth Harlan. I was just wondering if we can't get the HOP, does that service take workman's comp? Because I think my housemate had a Medicare and he's been completely disabled for over 20 years, but they drop him off of Medicare. And we don't have a vehicle also to go to the Medicare office so he can get that going again. But he does have workman's comp. So I don't know if they take workman's comp. I'm just worried because I need to get my friend to the hospital for his appointment. So when y'all start talking about it, I got
These are non-emergency transfers, but not for just doctor's appointments.
No.
This isn't a shuttle service that we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, that'll still be with the
It'll
HOP.
eventually be emergency if he doesn't get his medicine.
Well, yes.
So-
And then now you know the price.
Yeah. Well, sorry, it's going to go on credit.
Okay. All right.
So Mayor, just to, I guess, respond to his comments. There, some of the non-emergency franchises in town do have like a shuttle and what's called a wheelchair van service that's available to them. They take obviously all kinds of different insurances. I mean, I'm even less of an insurance expert than Byron, so.
But it's not free.
But it is not free,
Yeah.
but he could contact them. And they do transport people to doctor's appointments, medical, any medical appointments and stuff like that. So that service is available in town via our non-emergency transport services.
Right. But here we're talking about ambulances.
But here we are
Not-
talking about
not a
ambulances, that's
car
correct.
or
so
van or.
yeah, this is not included. The wheelchair service is not
Yeah.
included in this.
Understood. Okay, very good. Anyone else? Platform, anybody on the platform? Okay. All right, council, at this time, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion on item number 8.
I will
Mayor-
make a motion to approve item number 8.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Walker. We have a second by Councilmember Long. Council, please cast your vote. Item 8 passes 4 votes to 0. Item 9 is the first reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a 5-year franchise with Baylor Scott and White EMS, Inc. to provide non-emergency ambulance transfer services within the city. Chief.
Mayor and council, thank you again. So this is a renewal of the Baylor Scott and White non-emergency ambulance transport franchise agreement. This is done on an every 5-year basis. So the last one was done in 2018. They've had a non-emergency franchise with us for over 20 years, performed as required and expected by the city. And so obviously we recommend approval of this. Unfortunately, I got a message a little bit ago that they are not going to be able to be here. So I guess you're stuck with me answering their questions as best as I can, if you have any for that. But this is just a routine renewal of that non-emergency franchise for the Baylor Scott and White crew. And this is both their regular ambulance services and their specialty ambulance services that run out of Children's Hospital, the actual specialized children's vehicles.
Thank you, sir. Council, any questions?
Yes, does this service this gentleman's housemate?
They do have those wheelchair vans or those specialty transport vans that could do that. Again, that's not part of this particular franchise. That's a separate type of service that's offered, but Baylor Scott and White does offer it. And there is another franchisee here in town, Acadian Ambulance, that also offers that service. So it is available by both of those, but that is not part of this franchise.
No, I understand. Good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Item 9 is subject to a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak may do so. Step to the podium or raise your hand on the platform. Okay, there being none on either, I will close the public hearing. And council, I entertain a motion on item 9.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve item 9 as marginally presented by Chief Randalls.
Ouch.
Just a joke.
Poor effort there, chief.
No, it was fine.
All right, where were we? Okay, we had a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Councilmember Pilkington. Council, cast your vote on item 9. Item 9 passes 4 votes to 0. Moving on to item 10 is to consider adopting a resolution approving the final plat of Ray Ranch Addition, a 2.451 plus or minus acre, 1 lot, 1 block residential subdivision with a developer requested exception to the UDC section 8.1.3 regarding fire hydrants located in the city of Temple, Bell County, Texas, addressed as 2229 East Young Avenue. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And this case, of course, is also along East Young. And so you can see on the vicinity map on the left, kind of where that's located, and then zoomed in an aerial on the right. Once again, it's called the Ray Ranch Addition, and that is the proposed lot boundary. And so this is for a one lot subdivision, less than 2.5 acres, proposed for one single family home. No additional right of way is needed. TxDOT has approved a 30-foot wide access easement at the northwest corner. You can see that on the plat up there. A park fee of $225 per dwelling unit. So one is required. And in terms of water, this and the reason for this exception request and why this is before you, the property is located within the city of Temple's CCN boundary. However, the property is served by Little Elm Valley Water Service Corporation, and that is through a 3-inch service line. A water meter was actually recently installed for this lot by them. The 3-inch line is not adequate for fire protection. That's a minimum of 6 inches, as we discussed earlier today. So the exception is requested. The fire marshal and staff support the exception. The nearest water line for a fire hydrant is approximately 2,600 feet away. Once again, low density development just for a single house on acreage, lower risk certainly. And also Clearwater Conservation District. There are 2 abandoned wells, water wells on the site, one well plugged and the other reactivated, just to give you a little more context. And in terms of sewer, sanitary sewer is not available. Septic system, though, of course, is subject to approval by the Bell County Health District. And just looking at the thoroughfare plan, so FM 438 is a minor arterial. Mobility master plan, there's no conflict with just a single residential lot. So talk about low traffic generation. Trails master plan, sidewalk ordinance would not apply. Actually, it would apply, but a waiver for the sidewalk has been approved by me as the planning and development director. Just future sidewalk connectivity, and for a single home, the sidewalk is not needed to be installed by that property owner at permitting. And the development review committee reviewed this on July 5th. But this was also determined to be administratively complete and filed just prior to that. Property is within Temple ISD. And so staff recommends approval of the final plat and the fire hydrant exception. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval 5-0 at their July 3rd meeting. And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council, any questions? Pretty straightforward. All right, then if there are no questions for Mr. Chandler, I'll entertain a motion on item 10.
Move to approve item 10.
Have a motion by Councilmember Pilkington. We have a second by Councilmember Walker. Council, please cast your vote. Item 10 passes 4 votes to 0. It is currently 6:25. I want to thank everyone for attending tonight, and this meeting is adjourned.